as the Pindanda, and the macrocosm is called as the Brahmanda. So the Pindanda and Brahmanda are identical in the sense in their structural aspect and functional aspect also. There is an identity, or there is a what is called as a unity in both the things. They are not different. They are only qualitatively different, and functionally there is some difference, because this acts at a very gross level and at the microcosmic level, whereas the Brahmanda acts at the macrocosmic level, or Brahmanda itself is the macrocosm. Okay, then we are going to a very interesting topic or interesting aspect where we need to understand this carefully. What does this say? Sthula Sharirabhimani Jivanamakam Brahma Pratibimbam Bhavati. Saeva Jivaha Prakrutya Swasmat Ishwaram Bhinnatvena Janati. Avidyopadhihi san Atma Jiva ityuchyate. Mayopadhis san Ishvara ityuchyate. Evam Upadhi Bhedat Jiveshwara Bheda Drushtihi Yavat Paryantam Tishtati Yavat Paryantam Janma Maranadi Rupa Samsaro Nanivartate. Tasmat Karanan Na Jiveshwarayor Bheda Buddhi Svikarya. The meaning of this is, the translation which I have given is, the reflection as it were of Brahman in Sukshma Sharira, which identifies itself with the gross body, is called Jiva. This Jiva by nature, that is ignorance, takes Ishvara to be different from himself. The consciousness, Atma is referred here, the Atma conditioned by the Upadhi. Upadhi is an instrument. Conditioned by the Upadhi, by Avidya, is called Jiva. The awareness conditioned by Maya is called Ishvara. So long as the notion which is due to difference in the conditionings that Jiva and Ishvara are different, as long as that notion remains, until such time there is no redemption from samsara, which is of the form of repeated birth, death, etc. Due to that reason, the notion that Jiva is different from Ishvara should not be accepted, should not be held on to. That is the idea. Now, what he is saying, let us understand this very, very clearly, that there are three elements in this. One is the Jiva, the second is the Ishvara, and the third is the Brahman. These are the three aspects. Now, the Jiva is actually a reflection of the Brahman at a subtle level. Now, what does this Jiva do? This Jiva identifies itself with the gross body. See, the most important factor to be remembered is we identify ourselves with our grossest body, the physical body. Whether we like it or not, whether we agree or not, the fact of the matter is our primary identification is with the body. Body may not be the entire identity. We identify ourselves also with our emotions, with our thought, with our knowledge, with our experiences, and so on. But the strongest sense of identification is with the gross body. Now, this gross body is involved in ignorance, avidya. Avidya is its upadhi, its mainstay or the conditioning or the instrument or what we should call as the functional dimension of the jiva is on account of ignorance. Now, there is only one aspect which is called as the Atman, and the Atman is identical with the Brahman. Only factor is, in limitation, it becomes Jiva. On account of the ignorance part of it, it becomes limited and identifies itself with its gross and subtle bodies. And that is called as Jiva. So the Jiva is a conditioned aspect of the universal consciousness or the supreme intelligence, which is not in any way different from the Atman. So here, the important factor to be noted is that the Jiva is conditioned by avidya. And it identifies itself with the gross body. This should be very, very clear. And he has introduced the idea that this Jiva is a reflection of Brahman. That means there is a mysterious connection between this Jiva and the Brahman. And it is not tangible as we understand, and it is only a reflection, as it were. That's why the term Iva is used. The term it introduced is becoming the Jiva is on account of avidya. Avidyopath, his son, having conditioned by avidya, the Atma is called as Jiva. This is the aspect relating to the Jiva. Now coming to the aspect of Ishvara, a very interesting aspect is brought about which we have to understand very, very carefully. He says, Mayopath, his son, Ishvara ityuchyate. The same aspect conditioned by Maya is Ishvara. Ishvara is also a conditioned aspect of Brahman or the Atman, because essentially there is no difference between the Brahman and the Atman. Having acquired or having got into limitation and conditioned by what is called as Maya, that entity is referred to as Ishvara. This is what is important. Ishvara. Jiva is conditioned by avidya. Ishvara is conditioned by Maya. What is the difference between these two? Maya, as we have seen, is Prakriti itself. In a way, the first aspect that comes into manifestation is the veiling power, Avarana Shakti. And it also has this capability of projecting what is not true, which is called as the Vikshepa Shakti. These are the two aspects of Maya. And Maya, earlier we have already is Trigunatmika, is a conglomeration of the three gunas. Only in the Avyakta Prakriti, the unmanifest aspect of Prakriti, that the three gunas are in their purest form. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, these three gunas are in their purest form. But the moment manifestation is there, The first thing is the veiling. The truth is covered, avarana. And the second is the projection of the false. Covering the truth and projecting the false are the aspects of Maya. And it is also Trigunatmika. It has, the Prakriti itself has got that aspect of Triguna. So, conditioned by Maya, the Atman or the Brahman is called as Ishvara. Now, Maya also generates, as it continues to manifest and comes into grosser and grosser levels, it brings about, or it creates what is called as the primordial ignorance, avidya. This avidya is not normal ignorance. It's a primordial ignorance. Primordial in the sense it's right at the beginning of the manifestation. As the process starts, it is engrossed in ignorance. So technically, in a way, we can say that Maya precedes avidya. Technically, it's not, don't look at it in terms of time frame, that first Maya comes and then after some time then avidya comes. No, it's not that way. But in the process itself, there is this precedence of Maya over avidya, because Maya is the root cause. It's the Mula Prakriti. It comes from that Mula Prakriti. And as the process continues, the first thing that manifests or comes into being is avidya. Now, what is the nature of this avidya? The nature of this avidya is it is completely forgetful of its true nature. It's completely, it has forgotten what is its true nature. That is the ignorance. See, that is the state in which we are, because we do not recognize our true nature. Because we are totally entangled in avidya. In the yoga philosophy, Patanjali Yoga Sutras also, the very first klesha, or the very first, what we call as the, I would say klesha is a form of, suffering, a form of being conditioned. The first aspect itself is avidya. From avidya, the sense of I comes into being, asmita. Once the sense of I has come, the question, the aspects of like and dislike follow. Raga and dvesha. And finally, this hold of the I is so strong that it doesn't want to loosen the hold or get rid of it. This I is so powerful that it wants to hold on to it. And Patanjali Yoga Sutras very clearly define this state of being entangled and grossly involved and unwillingness to be released. That is what is called as abhinivesha. Abhinivesha is a technical term in the Yoga Sutras, which means that clinging to the known. It means you cling to what you know. You are not willing to let it go, and you are terribly afraid of the unknown. So you see the sequence, the logical sequence starting from avidya, you acquire a sense of asmita or me or minus, and that entity starts this conflict of division as like and dislike. Whatever gives me pleasure, whatever gives that entity called I pleasure, is raga or attachment, and whatever gives it pain is dvesha or hatred. So the whole vision is colored now. One of the meanings of the primary meaning of the term raga is coloring. So it starts by identifying itself as separate from everything else and is grossly involved in seeking pleasure on one side and avoiding pain on the other side. And as it gathers strength, it is so entangled that it is unwilling to let go. It starts clinging and clinging to the known, what is known to it. Within it, the field of its own consciousness, whatever is known to it, it holds on to that. That is the nature of avidya. There, the whole thing begins. So here, the Atma being conditioned by avidya is called as jiva. At a higher level, Ishvara is not conditioned by avidya, but he is conditioned by maya. Ishvara refers to overlordship. Overlordship means he is the ruler of the whole system, but he is also conditioned because he has to operate in manifestation, and everything that comes into manifestation happens only on account of maya. It is also conditioned by maya. That is called as Ishvara. Apart from these two, Jiva and Ishvara, the original unmanifest reality, or what we call as the ultimate reality or the supreme intelligence, is the Brahman. Whether it is the Jiva or Ishvara, they are in a very mysterious way connected to this ultimate reality, the unmanifest aspect of reality, which is symbolized by the term Brahman. Please understand that we are only trying to have an intellectual appreciation of this whole process. This is not the truth. The truth is something to be realized, something to be experienced, something which is beyond the mind. Therefore, whether the term Jiva or Ishvara or Brahman, they are only words and symbols for us. But it helps us to form a basic notion or idea about how the process of manifestation goes about and how the whole thing is involved in maya on one side and consequentially avidya on the other side. So therefore, he brings in now these three terms I hope are clear. Jiva, Ishvara and Brahman. If there is any point to be discussed or you want some more clarity, just put it in the chat. We'll come to it at an appropriate time. Now, as long as this idea of Jiva and Ishvara are different, Jiveshwara Bheda Drushtihi, Jiva and Ishvara are Bheda means different, Drushtihi means sight. As long as you have this perception of differentiation between Jiva and Ishvara on account of the differentiation in the Upadhi, on account of the differentiation in the conditioning of Jiva and Ishvara, you will continue to be involved in this cycle of birth and death. Janma, Maranadi, Rupa Samsara. We will be involved in this, and we cannot go out of it as long as this perception persists that Jiva and Ishvara are different. Therefore, he says, please do not hold on to that notion or idea that the Jiva and Ishvara are different. Do not accept under any circumstances or under any conditions that the Jiva and Ishvara are different. Tasmat Karanan na Jiva Ishvarayoho Veda Buddhi Svikarya. So, as an aspirant, the fundamental aspect that is being brought to us by the author of the Tattvabodha is that there is a natural tendency to consider Jiva and Ishvara as different on account of the upadhis, on account of the instruments, and on account of the conditioning that is there. So this notion has to be completely given up, that the Jiva and Ishvara are different. So primarily starting from a mental perception also, let us not be caught in the idea that the Jiva is different from Ishvara. Na svikarya should not be accepted, we should not fall a prey to this idea even mentally. Because as long as this differentiation is there, there is no redemption from samsara, which is of the form of repeated birth, death, etc. Janma maranadi rupa. Janma maranadi rupa, the form is of repeated birth and death, etc., is called as the samsara. Samsara means, technically or etymologically, it means a continuity. It goes on and on and on and on, and there is no ending to it. The ending is not there because its functioning is cyclical in nature, or it operates in a closed circuit. It operates in a closed circuit where you can't get out of it. The movement of direction to get out of it should be something totally different. That is what is the nature of samsara. That is what holds us. I hope these three aspects are very clear. Jiva, Ishvara, and Brahman. And the natural tendency to think that the Jiva and Ishvara are different. This conditioning is deeply ingrained in us. And as long as that conditioning is there, you cannot get out of this cycle. So therefore, see, this also in a way very practically broadens our vision. If we are mentally able to conceive this idea of unity, then what happens? Our whole dimension of operation and our field of operation will be broadened and widened. Because now I will have a great respect for everybody, a great consideration, concern for all living beings, because of the idea of unity. I am no different from you. I may be different from you superficially. You may have a separate body and I may have a separate body. But functionally, at the core, it is all the Atman that is operating. It is all that universal consciousness that is operating through everybody and everything. Now, this idea itself, even the mental idea itself, is a great revelation and a great sense of responsibility is created in us. A great sense of responsibility, a great sense of identification, a great sense of, looking at the whole world from a totally different angle. I cannot have any hatred towards anybody. I cannot have any, what I would call as judgmental viewpoint. There will not be any aspect of comparing, saying it as high and low. I am best or better, and somebody is worse or worst. All those things will simply fall away. Because now you have this firm idea of unity. It's not a question of belief. It's not a question of faith. It is a question of logical thinking, which tells us that essentially we are not different from each other. That has to be very logically understood also. Because we all have same kind of, propensities in different proportions, same predilections, same processes of suffering or enjoying. So there is a common ground for all living beings. This notion, this idea, a mental appreciation of it itself is tremendously liberating in one way. And that is the starting point. Therefore, he says, the notion that Jiva is different from Ishvara should not be entertained and should not be accepted in any form whatsoever. That's all. That's the end of it. And one can test in one's own life. When this idea is presented, and if you see things from that point of view, there will be a tremendous change. See, that's what Ramana Maharshi used to say. There is no other. One of his disciples who came from US and spent a lot of time in the ashram there, while leaving, he asked Ramana Maharshi, as to now I am going back to my own country and my own people and all that, and how should I treat or how should I behave with my people there? Then Ramana Maharshi just smiled at him and said, where is the other? There is no other. Atmavat sarva bhuteshu. He who sees every living creature as himself is the one who really sees. Atmavat sarva bhuteshu yah pashyati sa pashyati. Only that person is said to be having eyes and vision, who can see himself in all living creatures. Just having eyes and sight and being able to see the objective world is not this sight. From a spiritual point of view, you really have the sight or vision, okay, only when you have this spiritual identification of unity. Please perceive that unity. That perception itself is transforming in several ways. Okay? Is this okay? I see some some chat functions. Some chat is there. Before I go to it, I would like to clear this chat. Binaji says, can we see Atman as a spark of the flame Brahman? See, this is a descriptive aspect of it. You can very well say that, because in the theosophical literature, they have used a beautiful term. They said the Atman is an undetached spark of the divine flame of Brahman. It's an undetached spark. Unless the flame is there, there won't be sparks. Sparks have very limited life span. Okay. So the Atman and Brahman are essentially not different at all. Okay. Now, no better example than Namaste. Yeah, there was a WhatsApp message. Sunita ji says, yes. See, that's the divinity in me acknowledges the divinity in you. That's the way, that's why I am bowing to you. When I am bowing to you, I am recognizing the divinity in you and the divinity in me are one and the same. That's a good way of putting it. Now, consciousness is word is used for Atman and Jiva. Awareness is used for Ishvara. Sir, that's only a nuance of thing. See, it is a all-pervasive universal consciousness. When it is universal consciousness, it is called as Brahman. When it is operating under limitation, and when there is a division through manifestation as Atman, it is the limited consciousness that is functioning, because Atman is not an entity as such. Why the term consciousness is used is that it's not an entity as such. So it is the same thing. Whether awareness is used for Ishvara also, it is the same thing. Awareness is at a higher level, and therefore it is called as Ishvara. And Ishvara is a fragment of Brahman or Atman, yes. So they are not different actually. See, whether it is the Atma, the Jiva or the Atma or Brahman, essentially are one and the same. The Atma is functioning at a plane which is dominated by ignorance, and that becomes the Jiva. The Atman, which is no different from the Brahman, operating at a higher level, which is conditioned by Maya, is called as Ishvara. The idea is, see, I would like to know, Ishvara is not precisely defined here because it's only a descriptive way of trying to put it and say that the Brahman, when it is conditioned by Maya, is called as Ishvara, and the Ishvara is limited to manifestation at a certain level only. See, when it comes to a Shastra like Yoga Shastra, there is a convention that whenever you use a term, you have to immediately define it. The term Ishvara is used in the Yoga Sutras, and immediately Patanjali defines Ishvara as Klesha Karma Vipakashayair Aparamrushtaha Purusha Visheshaha Ishvara. He uses three important aspects. Ishvara is untouched by klesha and karma. Klesha is, as I said, the suffering aspect of it, or what is born out of ignorance. Klesha. Klesha means something which is complicated, something which is entangled, something which is tight. Klesha also means what causes suffering. Ishvara is untouched by klesha and karma, whereas the jiva is grossly involved in klesha and karma. That is the difference. Therefore, he says klesha karma vipaka shayar. Vipaka shayar is the whole reservoir of klesha and karma are associated with the jiva. We don't come just with the limited karma and limited aspects of klesha only. We have a whole reservoir of it associated with us. In the case of Ishvara, that is not there. And he also calls Ishvara as a Purusha Vishesha, is a special kind of Purusha. Because Purusha is, from the Sankhya Yoga philosophy part of it, Purusha is always unmanifest. Only Prakriti aspect of it is manifest. Here, Ishvara is called as a Purusha Vishesha, or a special person, or special entity called as Purusha, who is untouched by klesha and karma. That is the difference we have to understand. And as you say, whether it is the Atman or Jiva or Ishvara, all are mysteriously connected to Brahman. Whether you call it as a fragment or a spark or a link, there are some very interesting terms are used. If you go into this subject, that itself is very fascinating. There is a term in the Vedanta called as Sutratma. The Sutra means a thread. There is a fine, intangible thread linking the whole thing, which is called as the Sutratman, and which in the theosophical literature, Blavatsky calls it as Fohat, F-O-H-A-T. If somebody has read the Secret Doctrine or the Divine Plan by Geoffrey Barborka, you will find this term Fohat or the Sutratma. See, these are all terms, but fundamentally we need to understand that there is an essential unity of all these things. Yeah, you can see whether you call it as transcendental aspect, and Binaji says, would you say the term awareness is always in the realm of manifestation, unlike consciousness? See, unfortunately, what happens is the medium of communication for us happens to be English, which is not a very conducive language for expressing very, profound ideas of Vedanta. Therefore, I always prefer to go with the original. These are all, again, technical terms. Maya is a technical term, avidya is a technical term, upadhi is a technical term, and consequently, Jiva and Ishvara are also technical terms. They have to be understood not as normal, English terms or terms which can be easily translated into English. It's only as a means of communication at the mental level, as Janaki Ramji has now put it. It's only at that level we are able to. It's only for understanding. My request is kindly understand the idea. The notion should be very clear. We need not every time verbalize it to a great extent to understand. It's like a mathematical equation which becomes clear by itself without any need for verbalizing it and putting it into an equation, putting it into language. There is Atma plus avidya is Jiva. Atma plus Maya is Ishvara. Atma and is equal to Brahman. Therefore, Jiva, Ishvara, Atma, Brahman are all identical essentially. The two aspects that have come about is, one is the Maya aspect of it, the other is ignorance part of it, primordial ignorance part. So I look at it as that equations so that it gets embedded in our mind as a firm idea that these are technically and functionally different, and that too appearing, as it were, he says. They are not essentially different. They are, as it were, appear to be different because of the field of operation, wherever they are operating. See, that's why what happens is the very typical examples of management and typical examples given in some spiritual discourses of a person, of an individual at one level acting as a father, acting as a son, acting as a husband, acting as a something else and something else. So the functionality is the limiting factor. The arena of operation where you are operating, that is limiting. You can't expect a father to behave like a husband, isn't it? The same person. He has a role play. So similar, why these examples are given, mundane examples for management techniques and all are given is to bring out the idea that it is one and the same, but functionally different. That's the only idea. But what is the takeaway from this whole discussion is that you should never hold on to the notion that the Jiva is different from Ishvara, because that is self-limiting by itself, constricting by itself, and will continue to involve us in samsara, and there is no way out of it. The only way out of it is to get rid of this notion that the Jiva is different from Ishvara. That is the takeaway from this shloka or this explanation that is given to us. Hope it is clear. Then we can go to next. He is now raising the student is now raising a very important question. He says, Nanu sahankarasya kinchidnyasya जीवस्य निरहंकारस्य सर्वज्ञस्य ईश्वरस्य तत्त्वमसीति महावाक्यात् कथम अभेद बुद्धिः स्यात् उभयोः विरुद्ध धर्माक्रांतत्वात् इति चेत् न स्थूल सूक्ष्म शरीराभिमानी त्वं पदवाच्यार्थः उपाधि विनिर्मुक्तं समाधि दशा संपन्नं शुद्धं चैतन्यं त्वं पदलक्ष्यार्थः एवं सर्वज्ञत्वादि विशिष्ट ईश्वरः तत्पदवाच्यार्थः उपाधिशून्यं शुद्धचैतन्यं तत्पदलक्ष्यार्थः एवं च जीवेश्वरयोः चैतन्यरूपेण अभेदे बाधकाभावः. This is a slightly long one, but very important and essential factor is being brought as a continuation of what was explained earlier. The explanation, the doubt that is being raised is, but the Jiva is endowed with ego and his knowledge is limited, whereas Ishvara is without ego and is omniscient. Then how can there be identity, as stated in the Mahavakya Tattvamasi, between these two who are possessed of contradictory characteristics? The answer given is no, it is not so. The literal meaning of the word thou, tvam, thou means tvam, is the one who identifies himself with gross and subtle bodies. The implied meaning of the word thou is pure awareness, which is free from all conditionings and which is appreciated in the state of samadhi. So also the literal meaning of the word that is the Ishvara having omniscience, etc. The implied meaning of the word that is the pure awareness free of all conditionings. Thus, there is no contradiction regarding the identity between Jiva and Ishvara from the standpoint of awareness. Okay? Shuddha Chaitanya is the term used for awareness. Now, look at the interesting doubt that has been raised. The Jiva, on account of ignorance, identifies himself with the gross and subtle bodies, which is nothing else than the ego, and also the knowledge of the Jiva in all respects is limited. So, two things are operating here, ahankara and kinchidnyaha. Kinchidnyaha means a little amount of knowledge. That means it is a limited knowledge. So the jiva is identifying himself separately and creates this sense of I or ego. And on account of its limitation being operating in avidya, whatever knowledge it acquires cannot be beyond limitation. It will be only limited. However vast it may be, it is still limited. Now, when it comes to Ishvara, there is no aspect of ego at all. It is nirahankara. Because from avidya flows asmita, we have seen earlier. Only from avidya, the sense of identity, the sense of ego flows from there. Ishvara is not bound by avidya. Ishvara is bound by maya. And therefore, he does not have the sense of identity or ego. And because it is beyond avidya, it is omniscient. It has sarvajñatva. Here it is kinchidnyaha. There is a limited knowledge aspect of it. There it is sarvajñaha. Ishvara is sarvajñaha. Now the doubt is, how can there be identity as stated in the Mahavakya, Tattvamasi, that thou art, or thou art that. Tvam, Tat, Asi. Between these two who are possessed of contradictory characteristics. Obviously, the Jiva is possessed of ego and limited knowledge, whereas Ishvara is without ego and omniscient. These are contradictory characteristics. How can the two be identical? How can the two be one and the same? As stated in the Mahavakya, Tattvamasi is the doubt. A very important doubt is being raised here. I hope the idea is clear. The nature of the Jiva on account of avidya is the identification with its own bodies, the gross and the subtle bodies, and creating this sense of ego, and being operational in the field of ignorance, it will be always limited. Whereas the Jiva is, whereas the Ishvara is not operating within the field of limitation of avidya, but operating in the field of maya, it has no sense of ego, and it is omniscient as compared to the Jiva. Then how can these two be identical? Because that's what he has said earlier. First, get rid of this notion that the two are different. He says when things have totally contradictory characteristics, how can one call them as identical or identify, the identical in nature and not different, especially in the light of the Mahavakya Tattvamasi. Now, there are two important things that he is bringing out in the reply that is given. First of all, he says, no, it is not so. Your doubt is invalid. Why? Because he says the literal meaning of the word thou, tvam, is the one who identifies himself with gross and subtle bodies at one level. This is called as vachyartha. Vachyartha means from a literal point of view, the jiva is identifying himself with the gross and the subtle bodies. So at one level of understanding, it is identical with the gross and subtle bodies. From the Vachyartha point of view, or from the literal aspect of it. Now, what is the Lakshyartha? Lakshyartha is the implied meaning of the word. The Lakshyartha is that what he is calling as thou is pure awareness. The thou has got two aspects. You. Thou means the old archaic English, which means you. You at one level, at a definitional or literal meaning level, is the gross and the subtle bodies. There's a second level of understanding of this word thou, which is called as the Lakshyartha, or the what is indicated by it as pure awareness, which is free from all conditionings and which is appreciated in the state of samadhi. In the state of samadhi, this you is unconditioned and recognizes itself as nothing other than pure awareness or pure consciousness. So there are two levels of understanding. One level of understanding is the identity with the gross and subtle aspects of it. Okay? Bodies, subtle bodies, which is the jiva. The other is the same tvam, the same you, when it is in a state of samadhi, it is free from all conditionings and becomes pure awareness. So he is very clearly saying that you have to differentiate these things. Differentiate the vachyartha and the lakshyartha. Both are meant here. At one level, it is the physical or literal aspect of it. At other level, it is the implied or the experiential level. How do you experience that? You experience it in samadhi. When you are in that state of samadhi, you are totally free from all conditionings and you are pure awareness at that level. This is one aspect. Now we'll come to Ishvara. In the case of Ishvara, Ishvara is referred to here as Tat. Tat Tvamasi, isn't it? The Mahavakya is Tvam Tat Asi. What is this Tat? This Tat, at the literal meaning, implies without ego and omniscience. But still, it is conditioned by Maya. So at the literal meaning level or at a superficial level, when it is referred to as that Ishvara is omniscient and without the sense of ego. But at the Lakshyartha level or the implied meaning or the experiential level, that which refers to Ishvara is again pure awareness free of all conditionings. So at the Lakshyartha level or the experiential level, thou and that are one and the same. You see are you able to see this here? See the last sentence. The implied meaning of the word thou is pure awareness which is free from all conditionings and which is appreciated in the state of samadhi. This is the Lakshyartha pertaining to Tvam. And what is the Lakshyartha pertaining to Tat? The implied meaning or the experiential meaning of the word that is again pure awareness free from all conditions, free of all conditions. So therefore, Tvam and Tat are one and the same. That is the meaning of the Mahavakya, Tattvamasi. So at an experiential level, at a deeper level, thou recognizes its own true nature in a state of samadhi, which is free from all conditionings, and as pure consciousness or pure awareness. That which is referred to as Ishvara also at a deeper level is pure awareness free from all conditionings, including the conditioning of Maya in this case, and in the case of you, from the conditioning of avidya. So therefore, they are not contradictory in characteristics. It's only again functionally at a superficial level, at a vachyartha level, they appear to be different. But at a lakshyartha level, they are one and the same. I am deliberately using the Sanskrit terms so that one becomes, because the idea of literal meaning and implied meaning do not convey the true sense of the terms vachyartha and lakshyartha, which is used in the explanation. स्थूल सूक्ष्म शरीराभिमानी त्वं पद वाच्यार्थः उपाधि विनिर्मुक्तं समाधि दशा संपन्नं शुद्ध चैतन्यं त्वं pada lakshyartha. The same tvam is vachyartha at one level when it is identifying itself with the gross and subtle bodies, and it is identical with the pure consciousness or pure awareness when it is free from conditioning and it is experienced in the state of samadhi. Same with respect to Ishvara also. It is without ego and omniscient at the vachyartha level, but at the lakshyartha level, when you understand it at a deeper level, tat means again upadhi shunyam and shuddha chaitanyam. There is no conditioning there, and it is also shuddha chaitanyam. In both the cases, the term shuddha chaitanyam is used. Therefore, from the chaitanya or the pure awareness point of view, there is no contradiction at all. Thus, there is no contradiction regarding the identity between Jiva and Ishvara from the standpoint of awareness. This is the important aspect one needs to remember. So these are two very important, explanations which are given, which have to be understood at a much deeper level. It is clarifying the position that they are not different, and one should not carry the notion of Jiva and Ishvara being different, is further reinforced by this idea of Tattvamasi and bringing it into focus that they are not different at all. They are in no way different. Yes, sir, there is some chat function. Atman is equal to Brahman. Brahman plus Upadhi is Jiva. Brahman plus Maya is Ishvara. And Ishvara minus Maya is Brahman. Right. You put the equations right. After all, Janaki Ramji, we are all engineers and we have some applied mathematics background, and that is what is given. Now, the point is, the challenge is to bring the state of samadhi without any conditioning in waking state as well. So that is the technique. That is the samadhi. Samadhi is a state of consciousness where there is only the awareness and there is no, coming back to a beautiful way of putting it is by what Jiddu Krishnamurti says, that the observer and the observed are not different. And meditation is that state where the observer is absent. Meditation, according to Krishnamurti, is that state. Meditation here can be equated to samadhi in one way, is that state where the observer is not there. There is only pure observation, which is pure awareness or pure consciousness. So that is what is to be done. One needs to go into dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. That is the yogic technique of coming to a state of samadhi or pure awareness where there is absolutely no conditioning whatsoever, because there is no activity of the mind in any form. That is the definition of yoga also. Yoga chittavritti nirodha. It's complete cessation of the modifications that occur in the chitta or the medium of consciousness, which is the mind and all its other accessories. That is the idea behind it. So I hope this is clear, and I would like more, some more clarification. If somebody needs it, then we can go into it, because I want this to be very, very clear in one's mind. See, the participants should have tremendous amount of clarity, mental clarity, intellectual clarity. Forget about other things, going beyond the mind and samadhi, consciousness, and all that is a much different aspect. We are not at that level. We are primarily at the intellectual appreciation level of this topic, and therefore it is important to have that tremendous clarity that is required. The tremendous amount of clarity that is required is important for us. So is that clear? If that is clear, then we can try to cover some more topics, or we can move to other aspects of it, because here again the subsequent description is about Jivan Mukta. So that we can come to it slightly later, but I want more of I'll stop sharing for the time being, and let me see. Some other chat is there by Sunita ji. If we see ourselves as form, we cannot experience the formless. No, experiencing the formless is a different issue altogether. What I'm saying is, it's not about form as such, it is about that fundamental idea of unity. It's a fundamental idea of unity of life. Life is what is manifest. We see people around us, human beings, living, all other living creatures, animals, plants, minerals. We have all these four kingdoms, isn't it? Mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, human kingdom. So all these kingdoms in some form or the other manifest life. That manifestation of life, what impresses us is the variety of it. But behind this variety, there is a unity. That notion has to be firmly embedded in our mind and our consciousness, that we are all one. We are all one. So that is important from our point of view. So once we know that we are one, at least intellectually, at least mentally, if we go on reinforcing this idea of unity, then what happens is, there is this possibility of moving to a different dimension of perception. Then we will see that the Jiva and the Ishvara are not different in any way. That is the Mahavakya. See, we are seeing this Mahavakya of Tattvamasi. There is the other Mahavakya of Aham Brahmasmi, where you come to a state of being where you realize that you are no different from Brahma. The four Mahavakyas are very intimately connected. Prajnanam Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, and Ayamatma Brahma. These are called, there are different names to it. I will not go into these things. The definitional part of it, the experiential part of it, the descriptive part of it, all these things are very beautifully connected and covered in these four Mahavakyas. the most important, maximum importance is given to this Tattvamasi, and there is a very great elaboration on this idea of Tattvamasi. Okay, it is in the Chandogya Upanishad. Okay, it is in the Chandogya Upanishad where this this Mahavakya of Tattvamasi is explained elaborately by giving different examples. Yeah, what Janakiramji says is absolutely correct. See, this prayer, this school prayer was given to us by Annie Besant. See, this beautiful prayer was given to us, penned by Annie Besant. And over a period of time, it has become a true prayer for all of us, where we see that, oh hidden life, vibrant in every atom. Oh hidden light, shining in every creature. Oh hidden love, embracing all in oneness. You see the progression from life to light to love. See the progression, beautiful progression. Oh hidden life, vibrant in every atom, which is what is perceived by us. And it is hidden. Hidden in the sense, as long as you don't perceive it, it's hidden. As long as you think that they are separate, it is esoteric and hidden from you. It becomes apparent the moment you recognize the unity. It's vibrant in every atom. Oh hidden light, shining in every creature. Unless you see that light in every being, it is hidden only. Once you see that light becomes visible now. Once that light becomes visible, where is the question of doing anything wrong, harming anybody or anything in this creation? So therefore, you see that once you see that light, you see that it is shining in every creature. And oh hidden love, the ultimate aspect of manifestation. God is love. That's what the Narada Bhakti Sutras also says. Satvasmin Parama Prema Rupa. The definition of that ultimate reality, or what we refer to as God, is Parama Prema. And it is immortal. It is eternal. Amrita Swarupacha. Its essential nature is eternity, eternal. That's what the beautiful statement in Christianity is also, that God is love. God is love. That's the fundamental manifestation. So, oh hidden love, embracing all in oneness. That oneness has to be felt. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. I cannot say that I love God but hate humanity. That's a contradiction in terms, isn't it? One cannot say that I don't love my neighbor but I love God. That's a foolish statement of it. When you say you love God, it obviously means that you love every aspect of God in whatever form of creation it is. The vilest of the man also is to be loved, not because he is vile. You have to love him for the hidden spark in him. Swami Vivekananda, in one of his statements, very beautifully says, I will bow down and touch the feet of the worst of the human species in this world, not because of what he is, but because of that divine spark in him which is yet to manifest. I see that divine spark in the vilest of the human beings also. And I'll bow to them. So that should be the attitude with which we are supposed to approach life, by this understanding of unity, by this understanding of this idea of unity. Once that idea of unity is deeply embedded in our consciousness, it becomes very easy. It becomes very simple for us. That's the beauty of the whole idea. Anything further, sir? Or it's already 11:18 in India. If that's okay, we can stop here, because I don't want to get into the further explanation of the Jivan Mukta and all. We are almost nearing the closing or the ending of the Tattva Bodha. Maybe another 2 sessions or maximum 3 sessions should be sufficient for us. So we'll have the next one on 22nd and then on the 29th. Hopefully this month we can complete it. It's only about the Jivan Mukta and then the Karma, the Sanchita, Prarabdha and Agami Karma. With that, the Tattva Bodha ends, which gives us a preliminary idea about this whole being. Okay?
So I have a clarification here.
Yeah, please tell me, sir.
See, this Tattva Bodha, and then there is Atma Bodha,
Yeah.
then Viveka Chudamani,
Mm.
then Gita. I'm just covering those which we also covered in School of Ancient Wisdom.
Right.
So what is the context or the order in which these are to be read or these are to be understood? Is there any linking or they are de-linked?
No, they are linked in a way. Tattva Bodha is a very preliminary text. It gives you basic ideas about Vedanta. It is meant as a Prakarana Grantha. Then Atma Bodha is a slightly deeper expression of certain things. And Viveka Chudamani is a very elaborate Prakarana Grantha, which covers everything that has been said in the Tattva Bodha and Atma Bodha in a much more elaborate way. It's almost close to 585 slokas are there. Verses are there in the Viveka Chudamani. If you remember, we did it almost for 1 year. 2 days in a month. It took us 12 months or 13 months, and I have condensed and taken out only the most important verses of the Viveka Chudamani and reduced it to some 125 or so. I did not go beyond that because others are descriptive and explaining or elaborating certain things. I didn't want to, because it's not literally possible to take up verse by verse. It can be done. It's not that it cannot be done, but there could be some redundancy of ideas or continuity of ideas which we can explain by taking the fundamental verse. So that's how we covered the Viveka Chudamani. And then the Vedanta, the actual Vedanta of the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutras. These three texts are called as the Prasthanatraya. These are called as the Prasthanatraya, the three canonical works of Vedanta. The Brahma Sutras is a tougher thing. Brahma Sutras and the commentary written by it is tougher. We have done an introduction to Upanishads and we have done the Bhagavad Gita very elaborately in the School of Ancient Wisdom, where we have gone almost by every verse we have taken it and done that program. So it's in a way a continuity. Tattva Bodha and then some Atma Bodha. The Atma Bodha is a much smaller thing also. And here it is in the form of question and answer. There it is in the form of verses, if I remember right. And Vivek Chudamani is anyway fully in the form of verses.
Maniji,
Yeah.
after this, what do you suggest we do then?
Yeah.
After this Tattva Bodha, should we go on to Atma Bodha?
Let us see. Let us see. Let us no, see, my whole request is don't consider this as the completing of some syllabus or portion. One needs to go into it very deeply. Whatever little we learn, how deeply it has impressed upon our consciousness is what is more important. So we will cover Atma Bodha also, no problem. That can also be done. But my whole purpose is whether these fundamental ideas of Vedanta, are they clear in our mind, number one, and have they sufficiently created a deep impression in our minds so that becomes the springboard for our journey on the spiritual path.
See, before we conclude this Tattvabodha itself,
Hmm.
we should have one session on what it is going deeper.
Oh,
One
yes.
session is required.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a very important thing. Yeah, what you said is very important. Very important. What is this going deep into it? Deep into any subject? What does it mean? What does it mean to us? How there should be a transformation at our fundamental character, fundamental approach to life. How there should be a transformation at that level is important. See, there should be very clear guidelines for us to what we are supposed to do and what we are not supposed to do. To be very clear. So that is the deeper understanding of it, or deeper study of it. So what exactly it means to go deeper into these things is much more important from that point of view. We can definitely take it up. One session at the end or somewhere in between, which anyway, as I said, it may require another 3 sessions according to my estimate to complete. So first week of September, we should be able to close it, or we will extend it by one more session to get into what exactly it means to go deeper, and then bring out the essential points of the Tattvabodha. Okay, sir. I think we are close to 11:30. If there are no further questions, we can end it here.
Yes, Krishna Pandit.
Yeah. Umesh ji is silent. I was expecting some question from Umesh ji today.
You said we have to have a session which says what is going deep into.
Right.
Deep would mean what is personal transformation that has happened.
Yes, or that is expected of our study.
Yeah.
The deeper aspect of our study, how it should proceed. Okay.
That's
Sir,
very relevant. That I think that's
please.
very relevant. That all of us,
Yes.
what changes, what transformation that we have experienced or we have adopted as a lifestyle.
Yes, absolutely, right. Manjula Devi,
Yes.
tell me, madam.
In the beginning of the class itself, you told us that this is the basic.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we would like to go deeper what it is there.
Yeah, the fundamentals should be very, very clear and should be deeply embedded in us. Like, for example, we don't forget ABCD or 1, 2, 3 or
Yes.
so that clarity should be there when we study this basic text.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.